On a cold February night, she found herself in a vulnerable position, needing a ride. A stranger stopped, a door opened, and Mary vanished into the darkness. Her body was found later not in Minnesota, but across the state line in a desolate ditch in Wisconsin. It was the 4th of July, 1972, a day of celebration and sunshine. Joli was last seen near Lake Calhoun, a popular summer spot, hitchhiking for a ride. Witnesses remembered seeing her get into a gold fastback car, driven by a man they described as being around 30 years old. It was the last time anyone would see her alive. Two sisters, Mary, 15, and Susie, 12, went to a downtown store and never came home. The Reker sisters, one a teenager and the other just a child, disappeared without a trace. Their absence created a void of terror in the community. A frantic search began, with volunteers and police combing the woods and fields, their hopes dwindling with each passing day. The innocence of an entire town felt stolen, replaced by a gnawing fear of the unknown predator in their midst. It was a quiet day in Uptown, Minnesota, the kind of day where the silence is only broken by the rustle of leaves or the distant hum of a lawnmower. Inside an assisted living facility, an 84-year-old man named John Keith Miller was living out his twilight years. He was a ghost from a different era, a man whose secrets were buried deep beneath the frost of time. But time, as it turns out, has a way of unearthing the darkest truths. In late 2024, that quiet was shattered. Investigators, armed with a warrant and a question that had lingered for half a century, walked through those doors. And just like that, a cold case, frozen for 50 years, suddenly began to thaw, sending a shiver through the heart of the North Star State. The arrest of John Keith Miller was more than just a single resolution. It was a jolt, a seismic event that promised to shake the very foundations of Minnesota's criminal history. For decades, a web of unsolved murders from the 1970s had haunted investigators and tormented families. They were separate tragedies, individual stories of lives cut short, yet they shared an unnerving, shadowy connection. Was there a phantom predator lurking in the background? A single figure responsible for so much pain? The authorities had always wondered. With Miller's arrest, they weren't just holding a suspect, they were potentially holding a skeleton key, a single piece of evidence that could unlock a Pandora's box of long-forgotten horrors. The implications were staggering, almost too vast to comprehend. For the first time, Miller's DNA, his unique biological signature, was being entered into the Combined DNA Index System, or CODIS. This wasn't just a routine procedure. It was a beacon of hope aimed directly at the darkest corners of the past. Every unsolved crime, every piece of decades-old evidence from Minnesota and beyond would now be compared against this new sample. It was a moment investigators had dreamed of. The possibility that this unassuming octogenarian, hidden in plain sight, could be the missing link in a chain of violent crimes was both terrifying and electrifying. The ghosts of the 70s were stirring, and they were finally ready to speak. So how does a story that ended 50 years ago suddenly find a new beginning? It starts with a single thread, a confession that unravels a lifetime of secrets. Miller's case forces us to look back, to peel away the layers of time and confront the chilling reality of what happened during that turbulent decade. The faces of the victims, young and full of promise, stare back at us from faded photographs. Their stories were left unfinished, their killers allowed to dissolve back into the fabric of society. But now, with one man's capture, a new chapter is being written, one that might finally bring the justice these families have been denied for so long. The year was 1974. The world was a different place. In Minnesota, a 25-year-old woman named Mary Schlais was navigating her life, full of the hopes and dreams that belong to the young. On a cold February night, she found herself in a vulnerable position, needing a ride. A stranger stopped, a door opened, and Mary vanished into the darkness, swallowed by the vast, unforgiving landscape of the rural Midwest. Her story became a cautionary tale whispered among friends, a terrifying reminder of the dangers that lurked just beyond the glow of the city lights. It was a disappearance that would leave a wound on the community's soul. a wound that refused to heal for 50 long years. Her body was found later not in Minnesota, but across the state line in a desolate ditch in Wisconsin. The discovery was brutal, a scene of shocking violence that spoke of a deep personal rage. Mary had been stabbed 15 times, an act of such ferocity that it left investigators speechless. Who could have done this? The trail went cold almost immediately. There were no witnesses, no apparent motives, and no suspects who could be definitively placed with Mary on that fateful night. The case file grew thicker with reports and dead ends, but the central question remained unanswered. Mary Schlais became a ghost, her name a haunting echo in the annals of unsolved crime. For 5 decades, her family lived in a state of suspended grief. Anniversaries came and went, each one a painful reminder of the justice that remained out of reach. Investigators retired, passing the heavy file to a new generation, who in turn felt the same frustration, the same maddening sense of being just one clue away from a breakthrough. The world moved on, but for those who loved Mary, time stood still. Her case was a monument to the unknown, a symbol of the secrets the Minnesota winter can keep. It seemed as though her killer had committed the perfect crime, disappearing without a trace, destined to take his secret to the grave. But then came the confession. In 2024, sitting in his assisted living facility, John Keith Miller calmly recounted the events of that night. He told investigators he was the one who picked Mary up. He was the one who drove her down those dark roads. And he was the one who murdered her and left her body in that ditch. Despite this stunning admission, he would later plead not guilty, adding a bizarre and frustrating twist to the proceedings. But the door had been opened. The ghost on the highway finally had a face to attach to her terror, and the silence that had shrouded her case for half a century was finally irrevocably broken. 2 years before Mary Schlais was killed, another young life was tragically extinguished in a crime that still sends chills down the spine of Minneapolis residents. Her name was Joli Truelson. She was only 15 years old, a girl on the cusp of her life, full of energy and teenage dreams. It was the 4th of July, 1972, a day of celebration and sunshine. Joli was last seen near Lake Calhoun, a popular summer spot, hitchhiking for a ride. Witnesses remembered seeing her get into a gold fastback car, driven by a man they described as being around 30 years old. It was the last time anyone would see her alive. A day meant for fireworks, and joy would forever be marked by her absence. Her body was discovered near Minnehaha Creek, a place of natural beauty that was horrifically desecrated by the violence of her death. Joli had suffered a shattered skull, a brutal end to a life that had barely begun. The city was in shock. How could this happen in broad daylight in a place so familiar to so many? The police launched a massive investigation, searching for the man in the gold car, but the leads dried up as quickly as they appeared. The description was vague, the car common enough to be untraceable. Joli Truelson's case became another cold file, another source of anguish for a family left with nothing but questions and a profound, unending sense of loss. Now, fast forward 50 years to the arrest of John Keith Miller. As investigators dug into his past, a disturbing detail emerged. In the Mary Schlais case, a witness had also described Miller's vehicle as a gold-colored car. The connection was electric. At the time of Joli's murder in 1972, John Keith Miller would have been 32 years old, a man fitting the witness description of being around 30. Was it possible? Could the same man who confessed to killing Mary Schlais have also been the driver of that gold fastback? The similarities were too stark to ignore, and a flicker of hope ignited in a case that had been dark for decades. But hope, in the world of cold cases, is often tempered by harsh realities. The investigation into Joli's murder faces a significant hurdle, a challenge born from the limitations of a bygone era. Tragically, most of the physical evidence from her crime scene was destroyed long ago, a common practice before the advent of modern forensic science. Without that crucial evidence, securing a definitive DNA match to Miller becomes incredibly difficult, if not impossible. The whispers from Minnehaha Creek remain faint, a tantalizing but frustrating echo. The link is there, a shadow connecting two terrible crimes, but proving it may be a challenge that even modern science cannot overcome. Just 7 months after Mary Schlais was murdered and 2 years after Joli Truelson vanished, tragedy struck again, this time with a cruelty that doubled the heartbreak. On September 2nd, 1974, in the city of St. Cloud, two sisters, Mary, 15, and Susie, 12, went to a downtown store and never came home. The Reker sisters, one a teenager and the other just a child, disappeared without a trace. Their absence created a void of terror in the community. A frantic search began, with volunteers and police combing the woods and fields, their hopes dwindling with each passing day. The innocence of an entire town felt stolen, replaced by a gnawing fear of the unknown predator in their midst. A month later, the community's worst fears were realized. The bodies of Mary and Susie were found in a remote rock quarry, a place of stark, industrial emptiness. The details of their deaths were horrifyingly familiar, an echo of a crime that had just shaken the state. Both sisters had been stabbed multiple times, their bodies discarded in a rural, out-of-the-way location. The method was a chilling parallel to the murder of Mary Schlais. Investigators were confronted with a terrifying possibility. Was this the work of the same individual? The signature elements, the stabbings, the remote dumping ground, were too similar to be a mere coincidence. A pattern was emerging, one painted in blood and sorrow. The Reker Sisters case became inextricably linked to the Schlais murder in the minds of investigators. They were looking for a killer who was mobile, who knew the back roads of Minnesota, and who preyed on vulnerable young women. The St. Cloud community was left to wonder if the monster who took their girls was the same one who had struck elsewhere. But establishing a concrete link was another matter entirely. There was no evidence placing John Keith Miller in St. Cloud at the time of the girls' disappearance. He was a phantom, his movements in the 1970s a patchwork of assumptions and unconfirmed sightings, leaving investigators with a tantalizing theory but little hard proof. Like the Truelson case, the investigation into the Reker sisters' murders is hampered by the passage of time. While some limited DNA evidence was preserved from the crime scene, it is a far cry from the wealth of information that would be collected today. Matching these decades-old, potentially degraded samples to Miller presents a formidable scientific challenge. The quarry still holds its secrets, the stones standing as silent witnesses to a terrible crime. The pattern is there, a ghostly outline connecting these tragedies, but the definitive proof remains just beyond reach, buried in the silence of that lonely place where two sisters lost their lives. The web of Minnesota's unsolved mysteries from that era extends far beyond the cases potentially linked to John Keith Miller. Travel back to a crisp autumn day in 1963 to a quiet Minneapolis neighborhood. Two little girls, Melissa Lee, age 5, and Barbara Foshog, age 4, were playing outside, their laughter filling the air. And then, they were gone. The initial police response was slow, hampered by the belief that the girls had simply wandered off. But as hours turned into days, a sickening dread settled over the community. This was not a case of lost children. This was something far more sinister. Their disappearance marked the beginning of one of the state's most infamous and heartbreaking cold cases. Nearly a month later, their small, decomposed bodies were found 12 miles away near Medicine Lake. The discovery confirmed every parent's worst nightmare. The investigation that followed was a study in frustration. The crime scene had been contaminated, and crucial physical evidence was lost over the years, a devastating blow to any future attempts to solve the case. Suspicions swirled around several individuals, creating a storm of accusations and theories. Melissa's own stepfather, Melvin Leverett, a man with a violent past, was considered a person of interest. He died in 2007, taking any potential secrets with him to the grave, leaving behind only unanswered questions and lingering suspicion. But there was another, more prominent suspect. An 18-year-old named Wayne Wakazo, who had escaped from a nearby training school, became a central figure in the investigation. Years later, in 1973, Wakazo was convicted of murdering 2 other teenage sisters in a separate, brutal crime. He was even indicted for the murders of Melissa and Barbara, but the charges were ultimately dropped due to insufficient evidence. He was paroled in 1986 and is remarkably still alive today. The fact that a man once charged with their murders still walks free is a source of profound pain and a stark reminder of the justice system's limitations. Decades have passed, but the memory of the lost girls has not faded. A 2023 investigation by the Star Tribune breathed new life into the case, reigniting public interest and prompting renewed calls for answers. A memorial bench is now planned for the park where their bodies were found, a small but powerful gesture to ensure that Melissa and Barbara are never forgotten. Their story is a somber echo from a different time, a painful chapter in Minnesota's history where the prayers of a community for two little girls went tragically and permanently unanswered. The search for truth in their case continues, driven by memory and a collective refusal to let their spirits rest in silence. The list of Minnesota's lost and stolen youth from that dark period is tragically long. A litany of names that deserve to be remembered and stories that cry out for a final chapter. In 1977, the quiet woods of northern Minnesota became a place of horror with the discovery of Cindy Joy Elias. She was just 19 years old, found beaten to death on a remote logging road near the town of Aurora. She had last been seen the night before at a local bar in Virginia, Minnesota, reportedly looking for a ride home. A detail that echoes with an all-too-familiar, chilling resonance. The St. Louis County Sheriff and the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension believe her killer was a local, someone who knew the labyrinth of logging trails and could navigate them in the dark. The case of Cindy Joy Elias remains open, a wound that has never closed for the Iron Range community. A $50,000 reward for information still stands, a testament to the persistent hope that someone, somewhere, knows what happened on that logging road. Her killer may still live in the area, walking among the very people who mourned her death. It is a chilling thought that evil can be so close, so hidden. Her name is another one that will be cross-referenced with the growing file on John Keith Miller, as investigators cast their net as wide as possible, searching for any connection, no matter how faint, that might finally solve her murder and bring peace to her family. 2 years before Cindy's death in 1975, another young woman's life was brutally cut short. Joanne Bonches, 21, was found in a farm field in Martin County. The scene was one of utter brutality. She had been beaten, bruised, and shot in the head. Her car was found abandoned about a mile away, another piece of a puzzle that has remained unsolved for nearly 5 decades. Investigators collected what DNA evidence they could from the scene, sending it to the BCA labs for analysis. But as of early 2024, no matches had been found in the national database. Her case sits in a state of limbo, waiting for the one piece of information that will break it wide open. Now, with John Keith Miller's DNA officially in the system, there is a new, tangible hope for the Bonch case. Her evidence will be re-examined, compared against the profile of a man who has already confessed to one brutal 1970s murder. Furthermore, investigators have learned that Miller also resided in Louisiana in the late 1980s and 1990s, a fact that dramatically expands the geographic scope of their inquiry. How many other states hold unsolved cases with his potential signature? The ghosts of Cindy Joy Elias and Joanne Bonches, along with countless others, linger in the cold files of Minnesota, their stories etched in ice, waiting for the warmth of truth to finally melt it away. For decades, the only tools available to investigators were shoe leather detective work, witness interviews, and intuition. But today, the fight for justice has a powerful, microscopic ally: DNA. The arrest of John Keith Miller is a testament to the relentless march of science. His case represents a pivotal moment where the past and future of forensic investigation collide. A single sample of his genetic code, a double helix of information, now holds the potential to rewrite the endings of stories that were thought to be permanently closed. This is the new frontier of cold case investigation, where the secrets held within a person's very cells can reach back across time to point a finger. This genetic revolution offers a profound sense of hope, not just for the cases of Mary Schlais, Joli Truelson, and the Reker Sisters, but for every family that has lived with the agony of the unknown. Each piece of evidence that was carefully preserved, a speck of blood, a strand of hair, a fiber from a piece of clothing, is now a potential key. Labs at the BCA and across the country are meticulously working, comparing Miller's DNA against countless unsolved crimes. It is a painstaking process, a search for a one-in-a-billion match that could solve a murder, or perhaps even a string of them. It's a race against time, fueled by the belief that science can finally give a voice to the silent. But science alone is not enough. The other crucial element in solving these cases is memory. While DNA provides the what, it is human recollection that often provides the how and why. Someone, somewhere, may hold a piece of the puzzle. They might have seen a gold car on a specific day, remembered a strange conversation, or harbored a suspicion about a neighbor or acquaintance for years. The renewed attention on these cases, sparked by Miller's arrest, serves as a powerful call to action. It urges people to search their memories, to reconsider old events in a new light. A seemingly insignificant detail from 50 years ago could be the very thing that corroborates a DNA link. The long road to justice is paved with persistence, science, and the courage of those who refuse to forget. The work being done today honors the lives of Mary Schlais, Joli Truelson, the Reker Sisters, and so many others whose futures were stolen. There is hope on the horizon, a belief that more answers are coming. If you have any information, no matter how small, about these or any other cold cases, authorities urge you to come forward. You can contact the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension at 877-996-6222 or bca.tips@state.mn.us. The truth may be buried, but it is never truly gone. It is simply waiting for the right person or the right science to bring it back into the light. If you like Minnesota's dark history and are interested in freebies and discounts across Minnesota, hit like and subscribe.